Let me know in the comments, in the chat if you hear the sound, so that we can get rolling. What's up, James? Welcome back. Hey, man, what's up? Good to have you here after our Zoom. What was it, yesterday or 2 days ago? Awesome. Yeah, figured today would be a good day. Sundays tend to kind of work out as a good time for everybody to kind of hang out and chat and walk through stuff and see what's going on. So let's do this, shall we? Yeah. So yeah, I figured especially today with all the news that's going on right now, everybody would like to escape a little bit and jump into the music world and escape the world of news realities for a change. So let's go ahead and do that. Yeah. Oh, that's right. It was Friday. These days just like kind of all blend together. But yeah, I'm glad it was good. It was fun. If you guys are familiar with Maidan, you should check out her stuff. If you're not familiar with her stuff, it's amazing, awesome. She's a great live performance, live artist, label owner, performer, resident at Tresor in Berlin, and yeah, all around super cool person. So glad to have you on here and in the chat as people start to join in. Hey, Jason, what's up? What's up? We missed you on the call this morning. Jason's doing my course right now, and we had our twice weekly call this morning, talking about kicks and bass, which was a lot of fun. I think one of everybody's favorite topics in this realm. But yeah, like today, what I wanted to talk about was kind of how I play, what I do, and why everything's set up this way. We've talked about pieces and parts of it. I've walked through the setup a few different ways, but wanting to just kind of show, I get asked a lot how specifically I do stuff, not just what I use and how it works. And I think there's a lot of information out there about the actual gear and how it works and how you use it. But I'm happy to answer questions on that if you have questions. If it's something I know, I'll answer it. And if I don't know, well, I'll tell you I don't know. Point you in the direction of somebody who might know. But just kind of talking a little bit about how I use stuff and yeah, how I do the improvised live thing rather than doing kind of the pre-prepared music thing, because I think there's a lot of info on that out there as well. And I wanted to just share a little bit this, and not saying this is the way you should do it, but just share it as a way to give you some examples where you can go, oh yeah, I didn't think of it that way. Maybe it'll inspire you to have an idea or to do something a little bit differently than you might have. So yeah, let's see who's here. Hey, Michael. You're welcome. How about a 3-month hypnotic techno stream? Is that what you mean by 3MO? 3 month? I don't know if I could do a 3-month stream, but yeah, who knows, maybe. Let's see, I'm gonna switch around the view here. There we go. Howdy. Yes, that is S. Vedra in the background there. Ibiza is my happy place, my favorite place in the world. I love to go there. I've been multiple times, family, by myself. I DJ'd there for years and years and years. Played a ton of cool shows there. So yeah, it's one of my favorite places, my happy place for sure. So yeah, I keep that as a reminder there of, where I'll go someday when I've retired from my regular job. Head back there would be kind of cool. So yeah, one thing that I always ask people at the beginning of these streams, let me know where you're tuning in from. It's always cool for me to see where these go. So we've got, all right, Luke from Minneapolis. So we know that. I believe Jason is Paris. I believe May is in Berlin. I'm not sure where everybody else is. So yeah, just pop in the live chat really quick and just let us know where you're tuning in from. It's very cool. Used to dance there a lot. Oh, in Ibiza. Yeah, it's cool. It's some of my favorite shows I ever played were there. Definitely some of my favorite clubs I ever played. I got to play for quite a few years in a row. I played back when Space Ibiza was a thing before they turned it into High. I played each year. I would go back and play Carl Cox's Revolution Night, which was a ton of fun. Yeah, got a chance to play pretty much every room there except the main room. So of the 5 rooms that Space had, played the rooftop, played the Sunset Terrace, played the salon, played the terrace, but never played the main room. But yeah, it was awesome. Got to play at Amnesia, which was also amazing. Opening for a pretty big artist, so I got to play to their sold out crowd, which was tons of fun as well. So yeah, it's cool. I love Ibiza. I love the vibe there. I love being in a place that's that beautiful and where, you know, everybody's there into music, which is a ton of fun. So yeah, Minneapolis, Berlin, Liverpool, Paris. Awesome. Well, all over. Well, thank you guys for joining in. Appreciate it. Yeah, so let's just kind of jump into stuff. How I play, how I use the stuff. Well, first and foremost, like when I do my live performances, I like to do them improvised. So I don't have preset tracks that I'm playing. I don't have stuff that I've prepared in advance other than a few simple patterns and some sounds. I'll generally store kits of sounds in the Dig Attack 2, or I was using the Rhythm before because it has kits as well. And I love to be able to store kind of kits of sounds, sometimes with basic patterns, and then I'll expand on those patterns or improvise while I'm playing live. And then as far as the melodic stuff goes, I use the modular a lot for that, for, you know, bass lines and melodies and some percussion and different things. And then I also use the second 8 tracks on the Dig Attack 2 with melodic voices in them. So like my kit of drum sounds will be on 1 through 8. So let's see, turn the volume here. So we got like kick is usually 1, 2 is usually clap or snare, 3 and 4 are percussion sounds. Then 5 is closed hat, 6 is open hat, and then 7 and 8 are percussion of some sort, usually toms. So I've got those set as toms. So that's kind of drum kit set up and saved as a kit. And then on the tracks down here, I'll have those set up as melodic elements. And just to keep them organized in my head, I'll put groups of sounds that go well together, like that I like the way they sound together and kind of the vibe they create. So like if you're playing more industrial music, you'd have a group of industrial sounds. If you're doing more kind of, you know, I don't know, organic house music or whatever, you might have that set up that way. And then I will set them up from left to right, going from lowest frequency sounds to highest frequency. Sorry. So that kind of keeps it organized. So when I'm playing, if I think I need something kind of in the mid-range, I know it's going to be one of the middle sounds. If I want to change up a bass line, I'll go for one of the lower sounds. And so those tend to be like lower end melodic things down there, and then things that are more kind of mid-range in the middle. And then on the upper ones lately, since the Dig Attack 2 does time stretching, I've been putting those in more time stretched samples. So I have those turned down so that we don't accidentally play them, but something like that that's already set. Or this was something that I recorded off the modular last night. Oh, that was a kick that I put in there. This was another thing that I recorded off the modular. So again, just things that have got there if I want to use them, but they're not organized like, okay, this is track A, here's the bass line, the kick, the melody, here's what I'm going to play in the bridge, here's the, you know, whatever. I don't put things together that way. I give myself a lot of kind of building blocks and tools that I can use to play. And then I like to get up there and create a bunch of stress for myself by not having anything prepared, to just get up there and start to write stuff in front of the crowd. So I'll kind of build tracks the way that I would have listened to a track that's already been built, like if I was DJing, and then I'll morph from one end to the other rather than doing a transition going from track 1 to track 2 to track 3 to track 4. I personally find it a lot easier to not prepare that stuff and just to be able to freely morph sounds from one section to another rather than trying to find a way to make a transition seem smooth between a preset group of things and another preset group of things that are totally different. That trying to make that sound smooth is more of a challenge for me usually than doing it on my own. So yeah, so because of that, I'll have a lot of things that the pieces of gear that I use pieces of gear that allow for that allow for kind of easy transformation from one thing to another, so that I don't have to pre-plan and worry about like saving a preset and then changing from one preset to another. And so I don't use things like program changes or things like that, because for the most part, I'm not saving presets other than kits in here, and it's really simple to load another kit. I do also tend to keep the basics of the kits more or less the same, and then just change out the melodic elements. So it's another way that I kind of simplify it as much as I can. Instead of kind of using the gear for every possible thing, I try to keep it as simple as it can be. So that said, we can kind of jump into stuff just a little bit. With the Oxy, I've got a kick sequenced in here from the battering ram. I've also got a kick sequenced over here in case I wanted to go back and forth between them, or in case I needed a second to change up something here or change up something here, I can do that. But in general, I'm using the battering ram for my kicks now, just because I like them. Actually, this kick that's here, this kick is actually just a sample that I sampled from the battering ram. So I just sampled that straight into here so that I could have something that would sound kind of, it's gonna be pretty similar to what I'm doing over here. So. So you can see it's very similar to what was there, just because that's how I had this dialed in. So it gives me kind of the way to have both in both places, just in case, because you never know, a cable could go wrong, a power supply could get knocked out or whatever, and it's nice to have a backup, so just in case you've got something else going on. So I'll start off with sequencing something like a kick drum from here, from the Oxy. And we'll get to the Digitech 2 in just a little while, but I just kind of wanted to talk about this. Then if I was to move on to like a bass line, so this is the Ericsson's bass line, and I have this set up as an 8-step sequence. In here you can set kind of the length, the start point and end point of the sequence, and make it whatever length you want. I'm a big fan of 8-step sequences in techno because I think that it provides a good amount of repetition that makes it a bit more hypnotic, and then you can have other things that are outside of that repetitive hypnotic part. So if I wanted to do kind of a rolling bass line, I would just start off with that in there. So having something on the 16ths. So that just gives me something just to begin from. And because I have this set to a key, I know that this bottom row is the root note of my key. And then I can start to mess around with stuff within that key just by randomly putting in steps or jumps. So. And then I keep the ability to change up the sounds within the module in my case. So I'm not worried about kind of presetting a sound here where I'll have sound kits already in this. So this gives me a lot more freedom to mess with things. And one of the keys to this is really getting to know your gear well enough so that if you want it to sound in a certain way, you know how to get it there. I think that exploration with your gear is really important to be able to do that, to be able to say, okay, I want to shorten this up, I want to lengthen this, I want this to sound grittier, I want this to be more percussive, I want this to have more, envelope. So you know how to do those things, so you don't have to rely on a preset and going from one to another. You can actually change it and move it to the thing that you want to change it or move it to. So once you get those types of sounds, whether it's in a modular or whether it's hardware synths or whatever it is, really get to know the gear well enough so that you don't have to think too hard in order to get it there. So like if I'm doing something with this bass line, you know, I know, for example, that if I want to shorten up the decay, I'm gonna do this with the envelope. I know how it works. If I want it to be longer, I can extend that out. If I want it to sound more plucky, I can add more resonance. So you can really kind of dial it in and feel the gear the way you want to feel it. Same thing with the kick. Like if I want this kick to be more harsh, I can add more distortion. Or I can take that back off again. I can shorten up the decay. I can lengthen it out. So just being able to dial in your sounds quickly on the fly is something that it's really good to practice, because that will allow you a lot of freedom. I think one reason why live performances can sound a bit monotonous is because people get locked into something and they're afraid to mess with stuff. They're afraid to kind of explore with their gear while they're playing. And because of that, they'll kind of leave something doing something the same for a long time. Or if they're using modular or even within hardware boxes, they might connect modulation so that it will in a preset way change the sound over time, rather than having the confidence in your knowledge of your gear to just jump in and do it yourself. And it's actually something that May and I were talking about on a call the other day, is that's the fun part. You know, the fun part is actually being the modulation, getting in there and turning the filter, shortening the decay, changing, you know, the sound itself is the fun part for as a live performer. It's exciting that way. And it's also really fun for the crowd when you're playing along and they see you turn something and hear something change, rather than having you like push a button and then watch your system play everything the way it was supposed to play. That ends up feeling, from the crowd standpoint, that feels a lot like a DJ playing, where the DJ put on a track, hit play, and then they may do things like filtering things in and out, or taking out certain frequencies, or mixing to the next track, but they're not actually changing up the track. If they're kind of straight CDJ DJing and they're not using like multiple tracks and stuff like that. So it's being able to get in there and do that stuff is a lot of fun for the crowd. I know that my favorite live shows that I go to, I mean, if you haven't already, which I'm sure most of the people watching this probably already have, just knowing the people that watch these, but if you haven't already, watch a video of Colin Benders playing live, and you have the feeling that you're watching like a mad scientist like create some monster of techno using machines. And it's really exciting to watch when you see him doing everything that he's doing. Whereas you'll see other performers that are playing live and they may be using like, you know, Ableton and a controller, and they're just playing stuff, and then it comes time to go to the next part and they're just launching the next clip. And then it feels very much like a DJ set and less like a live set. So for me personally, I love I love watching a live artist play their instrument, play their gear, and play it live. So because of that, that's kind of the way I set up my setup. Now, not to say that I don't have anything that I would say pre-prepare, and I'm also not this kind of purist that's like, well, you know, you have to be completely, you know, any certain way. If you have certain things that you enjoy doing that are fun for you and that are fun for the crowd, put that in your set to play live, like certain voices. But if you have other things that are less important or less fun, or that you have less skill at, record those things. Have a sampler playing some loops or some patterns. Or if you're a producer and you want to play certain tracks that you've produced because the crowd that came and saw you is coming to see you perform, they want to hear certain tracks that you've played, well, then it's really great to have stems of the key parts of those tracks that you can play, whether it's through, an Octatrack or an MPC or a 404 or a black box or a Digitact or something like that. Play those stems, play the key parts that are like the signature part of a track that people will recognize, but then save aside things that you can play live and make that really fun for the crowd to see as well. If you think about it, it's very much like if you have somebody who is in a more kind of traditional band, and maybe they're a singer-songwriter and they're playing a show without the whole band, they may play their guitar and sing while they have a backing track playing drums and bass and other stuff, because they can't physically play that all at once. So this gives them a chance to play their instrument that they're really good at and then sing, which is probably the other instrument they're really good at, but without having to do everything all at once. And I kind of look at live performance the same way. So I'll prepare some sounds so I don't have to make them on the fly, because I think that's boring to watch, somebody like figuring out a sound. So I may preset some of those drum sounds, and then I'm going to have some synth sounds in here that I can go to if I need a minute, or that I can go to if I'm not finding what I want here, or if I want some more variety, or if I get an idea. So it's really cool, I think, to have a mix of those things. And but the key to that is keep some things for yourself, some things that are fun to play, and the crowd will see that and feel that fun while you're going in and doing it, and they enjoy seeing it, and they can feel the excitement and the risk of, oh, they're actually doing something right now. They're actually playing something and not just dancing to their track that they pre-recorded. So it's a fun way to play live. But it does create some of its own problems, which we can talk about in just a minute as well. I'm going to go to the chat for a second and see what people have questions or comments about. If you have any questions, please put them in the chat. I'm happy to answer or show or talk about whatever you would like to. Hey, Webbit. Good to see you again for the second time today. Let's see. Reykjavik, awesome. Sweden, love to hear it. Hey, what's up, unknown artist? Jay said, that would be cool to have a live or a video where you show us how to sample things like the kick from the modular or other sounds and then use them in the Digitact. Yeah, so it takes me rewiring some stuff, which I could probably do, although that might be a little bit boring. But basically all I do when I'm sampling onto this is I just pull my my outputs, my main out from this mixer out of my analog heat, and I just plug it into the inputs on the Digitact, and then I'll just record and sample into that. And in the Digitact, sampling is really simple. You just hit the sample button, and then you can either arm it and just start playing and it'll record, or you can set a threshold and have it record there. You can set your step length and then decide what the input is. So is it the left input, the right input, or both coming in stereo? And then you just save that. And then once you've got the thing sampled in, you can edit start point, end point, and then you hit save, you name it, and it asks if you want to put it on a pad, and then you can just put it right there, or you can just save it into memory for use later. What I find really really fun about sampling on this machine is that you can go in and have, like, for example, this is something that I sampled last night, which I can, yeah. Let's see where we are here. Yeah, so like this is something that I sampled last night, so I can just turn this up. And I can set a trig for it. And unmute it. So this was something that I sampled in. So what's cool is that once you have this sampled in, you have your you have your sample that you have there, but if you then want to go in, you can take pieces out of that and save those pieces as individual samples, which is a ton of fun. And you can do that while it's still in the recording buffer so that you don't have to actually save this and then kind of destroy it in order to make something else. It's a non-destructive editing process. So you can go through and just take out bits of that, or then you can use this in different ways. So there's different machines. So this is on a stretch machine, meaning that it's gonna play that thing from start to finish. So let me just shorten this up a little bit. Yeah, so it'll be a little bit easier. So it's gonna play this sample like from start to finish, and it'll stretch based on it'll time stretch based on the tempo that you have. So you can go ahead and just play it like that. And if you wanna change up your tempo, actually I would have to change it over here. So you change that way up to like 170 or bring it back down to 140 where we were. So you've got the possibility to time stretch it, but then you can also add different types of machines. So a one-shot machine will play it once all the way through, but it won't time stretch. And then at the end of that once, it will stop. You have the warp machine, which used to be kind of a pseudo time stretcher that is kind of like a granular time stretcher. So it chops it into pieces and then it plays those pieces at different speeds as if you just put down a bunch of triggers for each one of the pieces, but it tends to be a little choppy. But then you have grid mode, which is kind of a cool one here. So if you go into the grid mode, you can chop this up into different lengths of grid, and then you can play those. So right now it's set to be 4 different slices within that grid, but you can take that all the way up to 64 slices. And so something like that, you then have, and then you can sequence those in using the sequencer here. So you can parameter lock to individual slices. So as an example, a friend of mine, Alex Anderson, he performs as Alex 106, plays with Travarsi a lot. He loads a lot of samples into different samplers that he takes from synths that he has in his studio, but he's not sampling patterns or melodies. He'll just sample a pitch in a chord, or he'll sample notes in a chord just all the way up, and then he'll load those in, and then you can slice and parameter lock those slices. So then every one of the slices that you've parameter locked is in key because you played them in key at the beginning, and you don't have to worry about that. It's in the original key of that. It doesn't necessarily change with it. But if you sample it in C, then you can change the key with everything else that you're changing key with, which is pretty cool as well. So anyway, the sampling here is pretty simple, which I think is great for samplers. I've never been a big sample guy, and I definitely prefer a synth workflow instead of a sample workflow. But I'm starting to use this one a bunch more just because it is so easy and it's so much fun to use. So yeah, so it's a good one. Hope that helps. Let's see here. Double class day. Hey Jen, what's going on? Wabbit. Yeah, all the people taking my course are here, which is pretty cool. I love that you're not sick of me by now after listening to all the things in the course. If you're interested in the course, there's a link to it down in the comments below. The next cohort starts August 8th, and you can sign up now. There's limited space, but you can sign up now, and then that will begin August 8th for a month. It includes about 50 videos, 50 plus videos of a self-paced online course. And then there's twice weekly calls where we do a Zoom call and do question and answer based on the section from that week. I give them weekly feedback on recordings of their live sets that they send me. And then they can schedule a one-on-one sometime during the month. There's a peer group online that they can chat back and forth with each other. So it's a lot of fun. So if you want to sign up for that, there's a link down in the description of this video. So let's see here. Also, this takes a lot of stress away because you don't have to worry about programming modulation, having it flow between tracks. I'm totally with you, Mae. The thing is that I do it this way not because I'm a glutton for punishment and like the stress. For me, it's less stressful to have control over things and do it myself than it is to have to think ahead enough to pre-prepare everything, set everything up to work perfectly together and then hope that nothing goes wrong during the show that I have to kind of fix while I'm in front of a crowd. I would much rather go in knowing that I have nothing set up and it's kind of like pre-disastered. So I know that everything already needs to be manipulated by hand. So I'm not going in and like changing things or fixing things that break while I'm playing live, but rather just playing live and performing. That gives me a lot less stress. So, hey, from Nantes. Okay, the French contingent. We've got Nantes and Paris now. Colin is like EasyBot for Octatrack, but for modular. Yeah, he's definitely the wizard. I love it. Can someone make me a MIDI controller that had 3 foot levers? There are foot controlled MIDI controllers. I've never used them, but I know there are some. I also know that I think Kink uses one, and I think that who else did I see? Loco Dice, when he plays live, he uses a foot controller for modulation to control stuff. But yeah, there's all kinds of foot controlled MIDI controllers, so you can use it to turn things on or off, or you can use kind of like a wah pedal style MIDI controller for modulation, so you can control like LFO speed or open up filters or whatever. So if you want to do something with your feet, I don't know that I'd be coordinated enough to do that while I played live, but if you want to do it, there's definitely stuff out there that you can do that with. Hola, hey Ed, what's going on? We missed you this morning. See, how do you handle transitions? Well, basically, like what I was saying before, I don't actually do transitions because I don't have something pre-prepared. So I kind of go back to the like my DJ life. The way you would transition between things when you're DJing a lot of times is by frequency bands. So you may bring the kick out of one track while you bring in the kick from another track, or bring out the hats from one track by doing it using an EQ. And so I tend to do that the same. So like if I was, let's see here, if I was kind of playing along with this bass line that we were talking about, and I wanted to go to a different bass line. Let me just make sure that I've got this going to the right direction. Yeah. So let's say I wanted to go from this bass line to this bass line. I'm gonna actually change that one so you can hear it a bit. Okay, so if I wanted to go from the bass line I was originally on to that one, rather than trying to find a transition from one track to another, I would do something like I would when I was DJing. So I might take this one and put it through a filter, for example. And maybe as I filter, I start to bring in the other bass line. And then I can bring out the first bass line a bit. And then when I drop back into this, I'm dropping back into my new bass line. Okay, so that's one way you can do it. Or if we're back here again on the first one and you don't want to use an effect like that, you can do stuff where you bring them both in together, or you bring one down and make it more subtle, or you can bring out your kick and create a breakdown and then bring in something else like a third voice. And have that kind of take over the attention. And then bring in something else this way. And then you can bring your kick back in. Right? So there's a lot of different ways you can do it, but I'm not transitioning song to song as much as I am transitioning instrument to instrument. So this was an example of how to go from one bass to another bass. And it would be the same thing for melodic elements. It would be the same for percussive elements, where you would bring things in and bring things out on an instrument by instrument basis, on a sound by sound basis, to make it smooth. So before you know it, you've moved over to another track by transitioning sound by sound. So again, if we were just kind of, so if we were kind of cruising along with something like this, and we wanted to get to that other bass line and maybe another sound in here as well, we can start to bring in parts. And then we can create a break to do something else. And during breaks, it's nice to kind of build up energy or wash out energy using either like rises or reverbs, because that can help cover the sound of taking stuff out, and then you can filter as well. So you can see that we've gone from something totally different from this to what is in effect a different track. But it wasn't by going from one preset group of things to another preset group of things. It was by moving things across bit by bit. And I find that makes things a lot smoother when you're doing it live than if you're trying to basically cover up the act of jolting from one group of things to another group of things. And that's a personal preference thing for me. For other people, it may be easier and more fun and more controlled to be able to do it the other way. For me personally, I prefer doing it this way, where I'm doing it more subtly and I'm doing it instrument by instrument and bringing things in and bringing things out. So rather than having the idea that I have a group of tracks that I'm playing over the course of a performance, for me, it's kind of like I'm playing one track from the start of the night to the end of the night, but that track is an entire story that kind of goes through different levels of energy and different keys and different soundscapes and different everything. And it's constantly changing from one to the other, rather than having track, 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 track. It's easier to do it this way when you're not trying to play actual tracks, when you're not trying to play something that you've produced or that you've released and you want to play for a crowd or things. This is easier if you're not doing that. However, if you are doing that, what I would suggest is sprinkle those in. So doing something in an improvised way, and then you can bring in, instead of bringing in another voice, you can bring in a stem from something else and weave that stem into what you're playing now, and then slowly transition the other instruments over to more the other instruments that were in that whole track. And so if you kind of strip things back to just the most important stems, that allows you to do that and play things that are that are known and that are prepared, and that's something that you may have done in the past or that people recognize, but you're also still doing it in a very live way, and you're doing it in a way that's still improvised, and you're kind of jamming with your pre-done track. You're jamming with the stem. So let's see here. Where do we go? Can you recommend the sampler that could play entire songs, like to use my Sub 37 Rev 2 and dance around the envelopes live, get the heebie-jeebies bringing a MacBook around? Yeah. So yeah, there's quite a few samplers out there. You basically want to make sure that whatever you get is something that has a long enough sample length allowed that it will allow you to do a whole track, and something that time stretches, so that way you can get it to sync with what you're doing. And if you change your tempo at all, it will take it with, it will keep it synced with the tempo without changing the pitch of the song. So the Digitakt 2 does that now, although it's not kind of its specialty, it does do it. The Octatrack does that if you're also into Electron gear. The 1010 Black Box is one that I've used a bunch in the past for doing exactly the same thing. The SP404 was kind of designed like that. I mean, to the point where the SP404 has a DJ mode, so you can load in a whole bunch of tracks and kind of mix back and forth between tracks within the machine using effects. So yeah, it's definitely set up to do that as well. If you're in modular, there's the Bitbox, which is the modular version of the 1010 Black Box. There is the Rossum Assimilator, which I had used in the past as well. So yeah, there's a bunch that are out there. It's just kind of down to your preference, whichever you prefer. But do make sure that it will time stretch and that it has a long enough sample length maximum that you can play the pieces that are as long as you want to, and that it has enough memory that it can store enough things in there that it's useful for you. So like, for example, with the 1010 Black Box, that one has micro SD cards, so you can get a huge SD card and just play things directly from that. So it's good. And the Octatrack the same. You can put in a different size memory card and stream directly from that if you use which track? I can't remember which it is. It's not Flex, it's the other one. Anyway, but it is possible to do it on all those machines. So let's see. Do you use mixer cues for live shows? It's funny you asked that. So I originally got the WMD Performance Mixer because it had a DJ style cue. And my thought was that, I can press the buttons here to cue tracks, and then I've got a separate cue volume and a headphone out for cue. I got this coming from the DJ world, thinking that I was going to be writing stuff in my headphones, and then while I queued it up, and then I was going to bring those things in as if they were tracks. And when I started practicing with that and played my first couple of shows like that, I realized really quick that as soon as I was cueing and doing stuff in my headphones, I lost touch with the crowd. And I would kind of go off on my own tangent of writing something, and I wasn't paying attention to what was going on in the room. And it was really distracting, and I would leave things playing for far too long, and I wasn't actually listening to it. So what I do instead now is I use things like being able to quantize to scale with the Oxy. or having sounds that I know I like them, or knowing my modules and my modular well enough that I know what the sounds are like, I can take my modular and I know without having it on, I can adjust the settings on a certain voice, and I know more or less what it's going to sound like when it comes in. Then if I'm using a sequencer like this, I know that I'm in key. So anything that I play is going to fit in the key that I have set. And then being able to look at this and say, okay, these are lower notes, these are higher notes, first note, last note. I've got a pattern that I can kind of see. So I don't necessarily need to do it in the headphones anymore. So I can do a lot of stuff live. And so a lot of times what I'll do is I will just get something ready to go just by knowing where the positions are. And then I'll bring it in. And then if it sounds horrible, I'll bring it out. But generally you don't sound horrible because you're in key, you know what your voices sound like and things like that. So I'll bring it in slowly and I'll modify it once it comes in. And that kind of goes along with that flow of transitioning sounds, because you're continuing on, you're bringing in something, but not in a static way. You're bringing it in a way that you're still evolving it and still doing stuff with it while it's coming in. So it actually helps to make things even smoother to do it that way. So that's what I do personally. Let's see, really enjoying the course. Lots of good info. Thanks, Wabbit. I'm glad you're liking it. Glad. Let's see. Jamie, hey. Are you not using the Octatrack anymore? No, actually in this setup, I don't have the Octatrack. I tried to pare things back as much as I can. It may come back, but I have some different ideas for it. Since I've been using the Oxy Meta for my transition effects, I didn't need the whole machine with the performance template to be able to have performance effects. So I can use this now for almost, I would say probably 80% of what I personally was using the performance template for, I can do this. Now, if you're using the performance template for things like beat repeats and a bunch of the builds and things like that, this won't take its place. This doesn't do enough stuff to do that. But for me, I like to keep the effects really simple. I don't like to do a lot of like glitchy, choppy, jumping around stuff. And so I was really just using like high pass, low pass filter, delays, reverbs, the wash, the circle riser that he built for me. I was using that mostly, and I can do all that stuff with the Meta, and it allows me to take a whole piece of hardware out of my kit, which is a lot easier for traveling and going to shows. So yeah, so I pulled that out for the moment. It may find its way back in if I decide to do more of the playing stems and playing along with it, but I'm not planning on doing that right now. So I'm just going to keep everything the way it is. I was going to use it for playing longer samples and time stretching, but then they came out with the Digitac 2, which does that, and it's a much smaller box, has a lot more tracks, and gives me the control that I need. I don't need, again, the kind of glitchy chops that you get that you can do in the Octatrack. So the Digitac 2 is working just fine for me now. So yes, so it is out of my setup for the moment, but it's still here in the room, so it's not gone forever. Let's see, the course has been a driving force for me to understand and apply so much information. That's awesome. Oh, well, thank you very much, Jan. I appreciate it. That was the whole idea of doing it, was to hopefully help some people have as much fun as I have doing this stuff. Hey, from Mallorca. Awesome. But you're an Aussie living in Mallorca. Cool. Mallorca's cool. I've been there, but it's been a long time. Let's see. Hello from the famous Goat Ranch. I don't know where that is. Where's the Goat Ranch? Explain deeper. Per sound transition is a great way to think about it. Awesome. Glad that helped. Thanks for the explanation. Yeah, it's, I mentioned this earlier on, like play to your strengths. If you're a keyboard player, bring a keyboard on stage. I am not a good keyboard player. So that's why I don't have a keyboard on stage. I'm much better at playing and programming sequencers and playing and sound designing live on the fly. So I don't bring a keyboard on stage, but that doesn't mean you shouldn't. It means if you're good at it, you should, because ultimately all that really matters is the sound that comes out and what people are experiencing in the room where you're performing. So if you can do that in a way that sounds good, absolutely do it. Like nothing is cooler than seeing somebody play something live and knowing they're playing it live. I mean, that's amazing. But yeah, so transitioning by individual instrument, that plays to my own strengths. Like I know my strengths are being able to do things by frequency from, basically almost 30 years of DJing. And so going at it with that mentality of transitioning across frequencies, which in the live setup, those frequencies are different instruments. It's not like you've got a mastered finished track that you can't break up other than with an EQ, which is why you do that with EQs on a DJ mixer. I can do that instrument by instrument. I can change up one hat for another hat. I can change up one kick for another kick, and transition those individually. So let's see. It's almost like DJ mixing with stems. Yeah, it is actually very much like that. If you've ever DJ'd with Tractor and used stems in Tractor, or used, bits and loops and kind of built tracks from there, it's kind of an extension of that. Being able to take bits and pieces and use that. If you ever watch, there's a series of videos, and I can't remember who put them out, but they're called How I Play on YouTube, and I don't think they've done one for years, but there's a really good one with Chris Liebing, and he walks through his setup where he uses Tractor to play bits of songs that are important, but then he also has a Machina playing using Ableton for effects, and so he's doing this combination of playing what's in effect a stem, even though it's just a looped part of a track in Tractor, and then he's using his live gear to play along with it and to augment it and to jam. So it's this kind of hybrid live combined with DJing and Tractor setup. And you can do a similar thing without having to use a laptop and DJ software if you're using a sampler. So you can basically loop a sample, or loop or put in a loop and have it continue to loop. And then you can play along with it and jam along with it. So yeah, there's a lot of ways to do that, which is pretty cool. Let's see here. How do you route the Oxy Meta? Does it go after the heat and then go to the PA system? No. So the way I have this set up is everything's going into the WMD performance mixer. And this is acting kind of like a little mini DJ mixer for me. So even the Digitac 2 is going into the mix in, which is kind of an auxiliary input. So I'm still controlling all my levels from here. I don't have level control over this here, but it's putting it all into one kind of master signal. Then I have the Meta set up on the master send from this. So it's master send and return back to this mixer. So it's sending everything out and back into here. And then I have kind of final volume control over that whole mix, including the effects part of the mix. And then that's all going out to the analog heat plus effects. And then that goes out to the house. And the only reason really why I have the heat plus effects here is to add a bit of saturation on the end, a little bit of drive. I do a high pass filter so that I can bring that all the way down to like 20 hertz and add some resonance, and that gives me a resonant boost at about 40 hertz or so. So it gives you a much deeper low end. And then the key to the heat plus effects, and the reason why I use that instead of the regular heat, is because it has a bass mono. And so I put my entire master mix through that, and then I mono everything below 200 hertz. So no matter where I play, all of that lower stuff is gonna still sound good because it's all gonna be in mono. And if it's a place that's in stereo, the upper stuff can still be in stereo, but without getting any kind of weird phase cancellation in the low end stuff. So yeah, so the Meta is on a master send return pre-master output of this mixer. And then that master output goes to the heat, and then the heat goes out to the house when I'm performing. But everything comes through here, so I can control kind of all my levels here, except for my per channel level in the Digitac, and I do that using the Digitac's internal mixer. So often when I play, this is kind of like the default page that I'm on, because I use this to bring sounds in and out as well as using the mutes, but I'll use this to kind of fade things in and out since I don't have faders for that. I have thought about potentially using a MIDI controller with this just to have some fader control over that, but I don't have it set up that way yet. But I may use the Launch Control XL just because it works really well with the Digitact. So let's see, back to this. I don't know if it's me, but with the cycles and Digitact, I have to make patterns and mix them, for example. But I'm looking at ways to make it more improvised, maybe a gear issue. I don't know. I mean, it all depends on how you use it. I do think that if you're using exclusively groove boxes, and especially if you're using just one at a time, it is a bit harder to do this type of improv, because the only way to get in there and actually make those changes is you have to change menu pages. And even though there's not a lot of different like deep menus on the Electron machines, you can pretty easily bounce back and forth. It's hard to do things all at once. Like here, I can filter and bring things in, you know, like bring 3 different tracks in all at the same time, because it's all very immediate and on the face of the instrument. So that's why I use this a lot more for that kind of soundscape, sound design, melodic side, and not so much the Digitact. But you can do it. It's just a matter of practicing with it and finding the things that you like and the ways that you like to do it. But it's harder with a groove box to do a purely improvised thing, just because of you just have only so many knobs, and that's not even an Electron thing. That's, you know, if it's an MPC, if it's a MC707, no matter what it is, you've only got so many knobs that you can control at once. And so it's not the easiest. And that's why I love to use modular specifically for those things. So let's see here. I'm just thinking, how do you ensure it's the same keys, you take stuff in and out? So there's a couple different ways to do that. I'm controlling anything that is melodic that needs to be in key. I'm controlling that from the Oxy. I'm sequencing that from the Oxy. And the Oxy has the ability to quantize notes to key. So I can do random generation here, or I can, you know, freely program things in the sequencer, and it will be set to whatever key and whatever root note I have set in this. So I set each of the sequencers to the same key, so I know they all work together. There's also a way here where you can set one as a chord sequencer, and then you can set the other sequencers to follow it. So if you want to do key changes in the style that you play, when you do a key change, the other ones will follow that key change. So you don't have to change each individual sequencer going out to different instruments. So that's why I use the Oxy. I get asked all the time why I use the Oxy and the Electrons, because their sequencers are so good. It's really good for the stuff that's inside the box, for like parameter locking and all of that kind of stuff, but it doesn't quantize in key. And it doesn't do random generation quantized in key. There are some things now with the Digitact 2 that are quantized. So you can, if you hold down a trigger and you turn the note, it will give you just the notes that are in whatever key you set up in the keyboard fold section. But that's new to this, and the Analog Rhythm does something similar as well, but not quite as much as this. So it's a pretty new feature here. So that's how I do it. Make sure that things are in key. Is anything that needs to be in key is controlled here, and it's set to a key, which I can change anytime during the performance, but that way I know that it's set, and when it comes in, it will be in key. The other thing that's important to that is that you've tuned your oscillators so that if this is saying it's putting out an E, it's going to actually be an E when it gets out there. So you have to tune your oscillators at the start, and then from once they're all on that level, then it will all stay in key if you use something that does that. You can also put, if you're using modular, you can put a quantizer in, so you can sequence things through a quantizer, or you can do random generation and put it through a quantizer, and that will allow you to quantize to whatever key you want or whatever scale you want. So that's how I do it. Let's see here. What's next? Thanks for the hint with the Coslin and filter about the sounds in the last video. Tried it out. Isn't it cool? It's that idea just kind of came to me when I was thinking about how I would set this up, and I'm loving it. If you didn't watch the last video, I'll explain it really quick because it's a ton of fun. So this mixer has 2 auxiliary outputs, and I have one of those going to the Coslin, which is, or Koshalen, depending on how you pronounce it. It's a frequency shifter, so it doesn't just change the pitch, but it actually shifts the frequencies and splits them, and it makes really interesting sounds. So what I have is it's set up on a send, so I can send different instruments to it in different amounts. So, for example, if I bring this up and I want to send, let's see, like I've got this bass line. So if I take that out, I have it set up as a pre-fader send, so I can still send to my auxiliaries without having to bring this fader up. So without having that there, if I bring up the Coslin, I can start to send on the aux send. So that's that bass sound going to the frequency shifter and being frequency shifted and then filtered and coming back into another track. So I can take the filter different, and it sounds a bit more like the original sound, but then I can start to shift the frequency more. And I've got the ability to wavefold on this filter as well, and add or take off resonance. Sorry. And then I've got that set up so that that can go out on a send to the Endorphins Ghost. So then I can bring that in. So that's just that bass sound going through a frequency shifter and here. Normally you would put this in a patched signal flow from a particular voice. And what I wanted to do was keep the flexibility because I didn't know what voice I wanted to use it with. So now I can send. But what's really cool is because it's on a send, I can send multiple voices to it and create something new. So we have that other bass sound that was here on the pizza. So that was the one just going to the Coslin from the bass line. We also have this sound. So if I was to send the 2 of them together, and then I can frequency shift those together. So that's a whole new sound in addition to these. So then I can bring in the dry signal as well. And then you can just add in a kick. And then as you change parameters in those voices, you're changing the signal that's going to the frequency shifter. So that can change things up as well. So if I was to add some more resonance, that's changing that sound that's going to here as well. Ooh, sorry about that. So again, that's just a piece of what's going there. So you can build all these sounds without having anything come in, and then you can bring them back in again. So you can see it's just a fun way, again, to improvise, come up with different ideas on the fly, but using things in kind of a non-traditional way. Because like I said, normally you'd use a frequency shifter in one signal path where you'd have a voice going through it and then going to a mixer or to a destination, whatever. But being able to put it on there allows me to mix on the way in and then add in effects on the way out, and also volume mix just that part. So it in effect becomes a new voice that can be made on the fly using combinations of other voices by just sending different amounts to that to that channel. So yeah, kind of fun. Let's see, how many voices do I use on the Oxy? You mean how many voices are being sequenced by the Oxy? In that case, I have the battering ram, the bassline, the Bastel Pizza, the BIA, so that's 4. And then there's 8 voices within the Coral, so that's 12. So it's sequencing 12 voices here, and then 8 in the Digitax, so 20. So I'm sequencing 20 separate voices from this, obviously not at the same time. And again, I try to never bring in more than like 3 sounds at once other than drums, because it can get really cluttered. But the reason that I would have 20 voices in my case and in my setup is so that I can do that per voice transition. So if I've got 3 voices playing and I want to replace them with 3 other voices, I can get those ones set up and ready to go, and then I can transition across. I can have the sequences all ready to go. I can have the voice ready to come in. I can fade things in, or I can use the effects to bring them in or whatever. And I don't have to worry about always making one sound into another sound, although I can do that as well. So it just gives me a lot of options that way. A lot of combinations of 3 voices at a time in 20 voices. So, Goat Ranch. Oh, Victor, I didn't realize that was you. Hey, what's going on? My friend Victor, who's a great house DJ and who has a goat ranch. So I call him Rancher Vic all the time. Do I use the Syntac? I do. I actually, if you can see it over my shoulder, it's right back over there. I have it in my studio, and I used to have it in my setup, but I was using it as melodic voices, and I was just using 8 of the tracks. Still the same, sequencing it from the Oxy so that I could sequence the melodies in key. And when the Digitac 2 came out, I pulled the Syntac out of my setup, because now that I have 16 tracks in here, I don't need the 8 from the Syntac. What I was using before was 8 tracks in the Digiton 1 for drums and 8 tracks of the 12 in the Syntac for melodics. And now I can combine the 8 and 8 into one box, and kind of like with the Octatrack, it just saves me a box. So it's just another piece of kit that I don't have to take with me. I still have it here, and I love it, and I use it in production, and it will find its way in and out of my performance rig at sometimes. But for the moment, I was just trying to scale down as much as I could, because I have some traveling shows coming up, and I want to keep this as easy to fly with as I possibly can. So, yeah. That's right. DJ Tech Tools did those How I Play videos. Yeah, there's actually one with Loco Dice that talks about the foot switch for the person who was asking about foot switches before. And the Chris Liebing one is really cool. Can't remember who else I saw, but it was, I think there was a Dubfire one where he was showing how he used kind of a hybrid Ableton setup, playing stuff as well. So it's pretty interesting. Good evening from Nuremberg, Germany. Awesome. Welcome. Can the heat be an audio interface? Yes, it is an audio interface. But then again, so is the Digitact 2, and so is the Syntact, and so is the Digatone and the Digitact 1, and they're all audio interfaces. They all have the ability to connect to your computer via USB and be recognized as an audio interface, and then you can run things into them. So like I can go into the inputs on the Digitact, and then I could connect this via USB to a computer and use it as an audio interface. So they all do work that way, including the heat. So yes, to answer your question, yes, the heat does as well. Shout out to the hardware performance class. Awesome. Thanks, man. Appreciate that. Yeah, so again, if you have other questions, just pop them on in there, and happy to answer and happy to go over anything that that you have questions about now that we've kind of walked through the setup a little bit. If you have any questions about how this is, how I'm using this, or how it's routed, or what I do when I play live with certain instruments, or if you want to hear a certain voice, or hear, how something works, definitely just pop that in the chat and we will go over it. Any plans to play in Northern California Bay Area? Nothing set, but I do have a couple things in the works. So I will let you know as soon as that happens. Yeah, so I'm in communication with some people about doing some stuff in the Bay Area, and I will let you know as soon as I know. Class seems great for any experience level, good mix of fundamentals while always focusing on the performance aspects. Cool, well, I'm glad to hear that. That was the whole point. I wanted to make sure that if you were just curious about this gear and just getting started, that you could use it and you wouldn't feel like it was over your head. But also, if you've been doing this for a while, you already know what you're doing, that you're also getting a lot out of it. So that's one reason why there's so many videos, but it's also why there is the one-on-one coaching, and then also the group Q&A stuff, because the group Q&As they can be at any level. Like some people are asking some questions that are really basic. Some are asking questions that are much more advanced. And also with the online kind of peer community that everybody gets to be a part of with this, they are helping each other out, which I think is great. So asking each other, like, how do you use this? What piece of gear do you use this? And like, what are you doing to solve this problem that I have? And everybody's at different levels. So everybody can kind of help each other, which is great. And also important to note that pretty much everybody plays different styles of music too. So it doesn't have to be, you don't have to play the same style of music that I play in order for you to get a lot out of the course. It could be, you could play anything. And I think that you'll definitely get something out of it. So see that you don't use external samples. So I do and I don't. So I do use samples. For example, some of what you're hearing from the Digitact 2 are samples that are, I'm pretty sure like the hats, I think like these hats that I have were from a sample pack. And I think the toms were too. Actually, I think the toms were samples that came in the factory samples that came with the Digitact 2, because I wanted just kind of like basic tom samples. But then I'll sample stuff in. Sometimes it'll be sample pack. Sometimes I'll take things from when I produce a track. Like if I produce something and I really like a sound that I made for that production, I can take out a one shot from that sound and load it in here. Or I can take out a loop of something. Like sometimes I'll take percussion loops and just load them in here, because it's just easier sometimes to just be able to defer to something like that. And if you're focused on, programming a bass line, there's nothing that says you have to program the drums, program the bass stroke, program the melody, program the, whatever. You don't have to do it all from scratch. So again, like I said before, play to your strengths. And if you're really good at doing a certain thing, like programming percussion, well, then don't use percussion loops and program that in all the time. But if you are better at doing melodics or playing keys, do that and maybe lean on either a pre-prepared sequence for percussion or a loop. I mean, Pre-done sequence is basically just a sample that was never recorded to audio. So it's kind of exactly the same thing. So when I'm setting up my drums, for example, like in my, when you go on my kick track, there's always going to be a 4 on the floor kick, just and pre-prepared, because I know that that's how I'm going to start out. I can sequence that kick and I can change it and make it into something else. But the most common thing that I would use would be a 4 on the floor kick. So I'm just going to put that in there. And if you were to go like to my hi-hat track, that's not a good example here, my closed hat, you're going to see there's 16 steps there. It's set up as kind of your basic closed hat because that's where I'll start from. And I may change things up, but that for me is kind of like using a sample because you're using a pre-prepared loop and it's just pre-prepared in a sequencer rather than recorded to audio and then bounced to a sampler and then being played from a sampler. So yeah, you can use individual samples for one shots to then sequence, or you can use sequences or longer samples or whatever you choose. Totally up to you. Let's see here. Can the 1010 black box send MIDI data? Yes, it can. It can send and receive MIDI. It can also send and receive, I don't know if it sends CV. I know it receives CV. You can receive clock. You can clock it via MIDI. You can clock it via CV. You can clock other things via CV from the black box, which is cool too. And then it has different modes. One of the modes, it's just set up as like a 4x4 grid of squares, and those can be loops, longer samples that you have set to loop. And you can basically just trigger it by just pressing it. It turns on that loop and it will loop in time. So it's kind of like launching clips in Ableton. So it's a really good way if you want to do those type of looping samples and play along with them. You can clock the black box, have it stay in time, and then just launch samples as you need them. And that's how I was using it. So it was in my setup for a long time, and I was using it for anything that I wanted to time stretch. So generally like atmospheres and vocals were the things that I was using it for. And so you could just hit a certain, on the touchscreen, you just hit the loop that you want to start and it will loop in time, and then you can fade it in whenever you want to. So if you have a looping vocal, you can fade that in whenever is convenient. So it's pretty easy to do it that way. Let's see here. For what kind of sounds do I use the BIA? The BIA, well, so sounds in general, in my case, I choose instruments that have a lot of flexibility. So, let's just go real quick. Like I'll start with the kick first of all, just because it's an easy one. This can be a really, 909 style hard kick, or I can shorten it up and make it much shorter. I can take the attack off. I can extend the decay out and make it sound more like an 808. Right? You can soften it up. So I use this because it gives me a lot of flexibility of sound. So I can make it into a lot of different things. All these other instruments are the same way. And so the BIA, I can use that for anything from bass lines to percussion. It can be kick drums. I've used it as a hi-hat. Anything that you want. It's got a great sound palette of kind of flexible sounds. And it has wave folding. It has different, you can set different harmonics and the spread of the harmonics. It's got an envelope built in. So it can do a lot of different things. Plus it has the ability to jump between octaves. And then you've got these 3 different, they call it like, I can't remember the name of it, but it's skin, liquid, and metal. They're like different types of sound. So again, it can give you a lot of flexibility. So if I go to the BIA, so right now it's on just like a short sequence. So I can soften this up if I want to. So like I could use this as a bass line. I could use this, I could go ahead and sequence some. And then if you watch, this can very easily be transitioned into something percussive. So if you just take this over to here. So you can see it can kind of go all over the place. So that's one of the reasons why it's in this case. I lean on this as much as any other voice that I have, just because it can go to so many different places really, really quick. So like with a quick turn of the knob, like you hear, like it has this thing where you can add in noise to make it more of like a percussive or hi-hat sound just by turning the attack down kind of past the shortest attack. So this softens the attack. And then if you move it back, you can get it really short. You can get it really short. And then if you go past 0, it starts to add noise. So you can see it can go everywhere really super quick. So having something like that in your case gives you a ton of opportunity if you need something percussive. When you asked what I use it for, my first instinct was to say specifically I use it for tonal percussion. And so as you can hear, it's things that are very short percussive sounds. I love the way it sounds like that. And things that you can use to go back and forth between having noise or not having noise, shortening up the envelope, lengthening out the envelope. So I use it for patterns that are rhythmical and not so much for melodies. But again, you could totally use it for melodies or bass lines or whatever. It also makes a good kick drum. It makes a good hi-hat. I was playing when I first built this case back up, because I'd taken a bunch of these out and put in my studio case. When I first kind of assembled this back together, I wanted to play around with it and make sure that everything was kind of set up right. And I had my kick, but I didn't have any drums and I didn't have this connected at that time. And so I was like, oh, I wish I had a hat that would just make things better. And I was like, oh, I can make the BIA to a hat. So it's just really easy to change that up and have it be a hi-hat. You know, like I could take this all out, make it back into an 8-step pattern, and then so pretty instantly you have a hi-hat. So it's like it has a crazy amount of variety of sound. And so that's why it's funny, because it's only one voice technically in my case, but for me this is like 1,000 voices because it can go all over the place. So yeah, I love it. It's one of those things that will never come out of my case just because it's got such diversity. I think everything else except that and the battering ram are kind of up for grabs. Anything could come and go at any time, but those two I can't see myself ever changing just because they're so versatile and at the same time so good at what they do, and the sounds that they make are so good. So that's what I use the BIA for. Ever tried the Legion? Yes, I have tried the Legion. It's great. The only reason why I don't have a Legion is because in order to get, I love how it sounds when you FM it with another Legion, and I couldn't fit both in my case, and it was a little bit more expensive to buy two of those. So for me, the Basto Pizza took that place just because the sound of it. Here. So I can get that kind of classic FM bass sound. So I can get the classic FM bass sounds out of just the pizza because it has dual oscillators inside and you can adjust the FM between them and you can change wave shape and waveform. So it acts very much like having two Legions, and the sound is similar, although I think two Legions sound better than this, but it didn't sound enough better that I wanted to take up the space in my case because I have a really limited case size just for being able to travel. And I didn't want to give up something else to put a second voice in just to be able to FM them together. So that's why I do that here. But yeah, the Legion's great voice. Let's see here. Hello from Boulder. Hey, what's going on, Boulder? Right up the road. I'm in Erie. So we are neighbors. Jan, thanks, you're welcome. Oxy Coral seems like a great treat for its size and flexibility. How good is it in use? Does one stereo output in for a specific place in your mix? So the Oxy Coral, the cool thing about the Oxy Coral is it can be a lot of different things. It has 8 voices inside one module. And it is, not only is it 8-note polyphonic, meaning you can play 8 notes at the same time coming from it, but it's also 8-voice multitimbral, meaning you can play 8 separate synths at the same time from it in combinations of up to 8 voices playing at once. Now with that, up to 8 notes playing at once. And what that means is you could have it be an 8-note polysynth that's one voice playing 8 notes at the same time. You could have it be a 4-note polysynth and 4 monosynths. Or you can set it up the way I have it set up, which is 8 individual monosynths, because I don't really use polyphonic voices. So I have it set up as 8 mono voices. So that way I can sequence it as 8 separate things. And from the Oxy, I can sequence via MIDI. So I've got one MIDI cable going into this from the Oxy. And so that way over MIDI, I can sequence all 8 of those voices individually on separate tracks. So I can play, basically play a whole show with just that one voice because you've got so many options within that voice. It is stereo out from there, so you don't have individual controls once it leaves the unit. You do have volume control within the unit, and you also have a filter envelope, amp envelope, resonance. The envelopes you have attack. You have so you have control over the shape of the envelope. You also have some built-in effects. You have reverb and chorus. I think they just added a delay too. I can't remember. He does so many updates for this that I have a hard time remembering what they are. And there's a lot of different options for what those individual voices are. So it's if you're familiar with the Platts, this has multiple instances of that voice within it. So you have FM voices, you have like a detuned saw wave that's kind of like a super saw. You have an analog modeled kind of like Moog style 3VCO Moog style voice. You have there's a sample voice as well, so you can load in samples. There's a mini or micro SD card. I don't know if you can see it here on the front, and you can load samples into it. So you could have 8 tracks of samples just like you have over here, and have this be your drum machine and just sequence it as if it was, I could put these same samples into here and sequence this as my drum machine. But I would lose some of the flexibility of control over the channels, so that's why I don't do it. But You can. And that's actually why the voice is where it is in my case right now next to the kick, is because right now I have it set up as drum voices, as like hi-hats and things like that, so that they can be sequenced from here. In case something was to go weird with this, I could still have my full drums here with my kick and then all the other drums and just sequence them from the Oxy. So it's kind of as a backup right now. Before using it like that, I had everything set up where all 8 voices were set up as the 3VCO Moog style voice, because I really like that one. It sounds awesome. And then these parameter buttons or knobs that are on here, if you have every channel be the same voice, the same style of voice, these parameters are always the same no matter which channel you're on. What I found was a little confusing for me is if I would switch like from an FM voice to the Moog style voice, these parameters meant different things. They would control different sounds. And I always had to kind of consciously remember, what voice am I on? What style is this? And then what do each of the knobs mean? And because there's so many different types of voices, it got for me when I was playing live really confusing knowing where I was at a time. So I simplified that by making it 8 voices, each one of them being the same type of voice, so the parameters always stayed the same. So I had to do a switch from one voice to another, and then the parameters were the same. And then I would go to the other voice, and the parameters were the same. And I would line those up where voice 1 through 8 was being sequenced 1 through 8 on a multi-track sequencer. So that way, I knew that if I was, sequencing track 4, I was on track 4 in here, and all I needed to do was go in here and go to track 4, and I know that that's what I'm sequencing, and that's what I'm adjusting the parameters for. So it gives you a lot of different options. It's an amazing module. The reason I have it here is it's kind of like, for me, like the reason why I have like the Pam's workout here. It can be whatever I need for modulation. This can be whatever I need for voices. So if I'm playing something and I'm like, oh man, I wish I had a super saw. Okay, well, I can do that. I can go to that voice and I can sequence something and I know exactly what it is. Or I wish I had, another bass voice, or I wish I had a lead that sounded more like an analog synth. Okay, well, then I can go to that. Or I wish I had a lead that sounded more like an FM synth because I'm using my FM synth for bass. Okay, well, I can go to the FM voice and I can make a lead on there. So it just gives you a ton of flexibility and variety all in one module. It is a bit less modular than a lot of other modules, because even though it has 8 voices, it really only has one set of inputs other than MIDI. And it has one stereo out. So you can't sequence it or you can sequence it, but you can't control it via CV and gate the same way you could if it was 8 separate voices in your case. So you do lose a bit of that. You can, however, do that over MIDI. So if you're using it in conjunction with the Oxy One, this can sequence and send LFOs or modulation or envelopes or things like that. So you can do all of that via MIDI to this machine, where it's harder to do it via CV and gate. So if you're trying to control it that way, you lose a bit of that. With this, you can only really control one voice that way. But it's like a Swiss Army knife, like for voices, as much as the PAMS is a Swiss Army knife for modulation, or the Octatrack is a Swiss Army knife for hardware for your live setup. So yeah, that's the Oxy Coral. Let's see, what do we have next? Curious if you have any catastrophic backup plans in your rig if something really goes wrong during your set. Any stories related to going wrong and recovering? Yeah, I always kind of joke, and this is something I actually talk about in the course, that it's not if something goes wrong, it's when something goes wrong. It's like things will always go wrong. You just have to keep that, keep that in your mind, like be ready for it. So for example, if for some reason my modular power supply were to go bad and all of a sudden I couldn't even turn this on, I could just connect my Dig Attack directly to the heat and I could play a show just using the Digitakt. You know, I've got, as much as I have a kick here, I've got a kick here, I've got drums here, I've got drums here, I've got voices here, I've got voices here. So it is kind of like two separate setups that they can be two setups if they needed to be in an absolute emergency, but I don't like playing that way. I would rather have it be spread out. And so that's why I use them together. So I do keep them doing different things while I'm playing live. But if I needed to, you know, if, I don't know, if something broke while I was traveling or whatever, I can do it with one or the other. I could do a whole show just with this. I could do a whole show just with this. So I do have that amount of flexibility and backup. But yeah, I mean, always bring backup stuff. Like I can show you, I have, go get this over here. I have this bag that I take with me when I go to do live shows. And it's really, I don't use any of the cables that are in here on a regular basis because I know if I take something out, I'll forget to put it back in. So this is all my backup stuff. So it's extra MIDI cables and connectors and patch cables and adapters to go from, you know, 1/4 inch to RCA to XLR to whatever. So I have everything that I could need in an emergency as far as cables go. So any of that that goes wrong, I have a backup that I bring with me. And then other than that, it's just trying to back up things within your set. But again, this goes back to the idea of not having everything pre-prepared. If your set is pre-done and one thing goes wrong, you're kind of screwed because you counted on that thing. With this, I'm not counting on anything. Like if I decide to, and if I'm just kind of flowing along, I could just not use the Digitakt for an hour in a set and just do stuff here. Or I could not use the modular for an hour and just do stuff here. Or I can bounce back and forth, or I can blend them together. So I'm not tied to anything. And because I'm not tied to anything, in that case, I'm a little less worried about what could go wrong because it wouldn't be as catastrophic. You know, it wouldn't be like, oh, I can't play that one part that I'm counting on, or oh, that machine doesn't work, so now I can't sync anything together. So I think it's another kind of notch in the column of why I like to play improvised versus playing things that are pre-prepared, because there's less that can go wrong that you don't expect, because you just kind of expect that you don't have anything that you can count on and you start from there. So like I said before, it's like if everything's pre-disastered, it's already not working as it's supposed to. So I can just kind of make it happen as I go. So let's see what else. Can someone help me? How can I trigger the DFAM with the Labyrinth? New and modular stuff. So those machines, I used to have the Mother 32 and the DFAM, and you have to send the clock from one to the other. And I can't remember what it's called on there. It's kind of an odd name, but you have to physically patch from that patch bay on the right, the clock to go out of one and into the other, so that it will control the other one. So it's not super easy. So you have to sync those two things together. Have I ever tried the Hapex? Yes, I have tried the Hapex, and it's very cool. I would say if I didn't have the Oxy one, that would probably be my next in line. That one or the Torso T1. I like them both. I think they're both really good. I think the Hapex can do a lot more than the T1, and I think the Oxy can do a lot more than the Hapex. So it's, for me, I kind of would put them in that order, but that's me personally. Like I'm not the definitive, like this one's better than this one. My personal opinion after having used them is that the Oxy has so much flexibility and ability to do different things that you can't do on any other machine. There are things that do all of these, but not all in one unit. And so it's amazing. Also, when you look at the size, the portability, that it's battery powered, like it's not even plugged in right now, it's just battery powered. And just the way it was designed, there's a lot of things that are really user-friendly in this design. You know, having something like the Oxy pipe, which is this module right here, where I can patch everything. So I have 8 CV and 8 gate outputs that I can patch out into my case. And then when I arrive at the show, I have this one HDMI cable, and this cable is the only thing coming from the Oxy One to my whole modular case. Everything stays patched while I travel. And then when I arrive, I just connect that. And now this is connected to everything. So having that kind of connectability and ease of use is pretty amazing. Then you have the addition of the MIDI outputs. So this has 8 CV and 8 gate outputs, which is great. But you also have 3 different MIDI paths that you can sequence out from this to either modular via MIDI or other hardware or whatever. And so you have, so like with most MIDI on one cable, you have 1 through 16. With this, you have 1 through 16A, 1 through 16B, 1 through 16C. So you have 48 channels of outgoing MIDI possible from one machine. And you just basically go out with one cable to this little thing right here, which is the Oxy Split. And then you can go out to 3 separate destinations from there. And when you're deciding where to send something, like if I go to this channel, it asks me, what channel do I want this to go on? So this, if I was to move this down, I can set this to 1 through 16A, 1 through 16B, 1 through 16C. And then once I set that, that's the channel that sequencer will go out on. And so being able to have that much flexibility to go out and control so many different devices is pretty amazing, which none of the other machines have that. And also having the ability to, this has Bluetooth MIDI, which I wouldn't use in my live shows, but I use it a lot when I travel. So I'll put like a soft synth on my phone and put in my AirPods, and I can write patterns in here using that soft synth and listening through my AirPods just over Bluetooth MIDI on a plane. And I don't need a single cable, battery powered for power, Bluetooth for MIDI, so nothing to connect. I can just do that while I'm on a plane. And then when I get back to my studio, I can just change the routing. And instead of sending it out via Bluetooth MIDI to my phone, I can send it out via CV and gate to my modular, or via MIDI to one of my synths that I have here in my studio or whatever. So it gives me a ton of flexibility for writing stuff while I'm traveling, and then I can use that, I can send that back out once I get back into my studio. So yeah, I'm a huge fan of the Oxy One. It's completely changed the way I work for live performance as well as production. I think it's an amazing machine. The Hapax is great as well. For me, it was a little too big just to take with me. I like the size of this one. And I also like the ability to have so much connectivity going out. The Hapax doesn't have quite as much. And this has everything that does as far as like song mode and saving patterns and saving projects and sequencing modulation and all of that stuff. So it's kind of does everything that does in a smaller, lighter package with more connectability. So that's why. Let's see here. Keep up the great work. Thanks. Modular looks sick. Thanks. Yep, it is a lot of fun. It's set up intentionally to be fun. Like, I enjoy playing live, and I set it up with things that I like to play live on purpose, because I don't know, if I'm having fun, I think other people have fun. Let's see here. Do you think the Oxy One has more potential controlling modular gear, or do you think it would be the same controlling just electron boxes for sound? No, and that's the other thing is you actually have more power controlling things via MIDI, because you just have 48 channels rather than 8. So you have 8 CV and 8 gate. So if you need a CV and a gate for each voice, you basically have 8 voices that you can sequence using CV and gate. But you have 48 that you can sequence via MIDI. Now, that can be MIDI to a hardware box, or that could be MIDI into your modular to a MIDI to CV converter. So you could then sequence up to 48 channels of CV and gate through that, as long as you had enough MIDI to CV modules in your case. I don't have any right now because that's not how I'm using it, but I'm using, for example, I've got 4 CV and gate pairs that are going out to the baseline, the pizza, the BIA, and the battering ram. So those 4 are all being controlled via CV and gate from here. But then the Oxy Coral is being controlled via MIDI, via TRS MIDI going into it right here. So that's controlling 8 separate voices just with one cable going into that. And the split is also going out and going into the Digitag to pass clock and to sequence tracks 9 through 16. So it gives you all that different flexibility. And if I was to pull this out and add a bigger modular case, I could just take those same sequences that I was using here and just route them to CV and gate and send them out to different modules. So just that flexibility where you're not kind of locked in from the start. I was asked the other day about the Poly-N Play and why I hadn't used it. And the thing for me is that it's all kind of a workflow thing, the way you work. And with the Poly-N Play, you have to select your sound first, and then you do things with it. Where, as you can see, my sound selection is kind of the last thing. Like, I'll mess around and come up with something kind of generic that I like. Then I'll work on the detailed sound design, or maybe I'll route it to a different machine, or I'll send it to a different place. And so having that kind of flexibility was really important. So yeah, anyway, that's what I really love about the Oxy. Let's see here. You mentioned you have a record label and another stream. Curious if you're putting any energy into it or developing anything around live hardware releases via the label. Yes and no. I do still have it. I've only done I think 1 release in the last 8 or 9 years on that label. I was pretty active back in 10 years ago on that label and had a lot of tracks that I put out with a lot of different artists, myself included. And then I just I was focusing on other stuff and focusing on putting things out on other labels. And I still have it kind of sitting there. And I will be firing that back up again really soon. And it's going to be changing into a label that really focuses on productions by people who are performing live. They don't necessarily have to be live performances that are recorded, but it'll be for artists who are performing live, because I really want to keep going and supporting that thing. I was actually just talking the other day with a good friend of mine who we will be doing a couple releases together coming up, and one of them may be on my label. We're just deciding. We may send it to another label, but we'll see. It may end up being on my label. But if you want to go in and see any of the old stuff, it's all available. I think it's all still on Beatport. Some of it is still on iTunes and stuff like that, but I think a lot of that got pulled down when my distributor changed a while ago. But the Beatport stuff is all still available. And so if you go on there, it's Clandestine Recordings. And back in those days, when I was producing that, I was producing under a different moniker because I wasn't doing live performance. So all of my releases back in those days were under Eric Bingham. So if you go look up Eric Bingham or Clandestine Recordings, you'll see a bunch of that. And then if you really want to dig back, you can see a bunch of my old house releases, which I was releasing under Ricard, which was another moniker. And those, I had releases on Head Candy and Trax Records from Chicago and a bunch of other ones. So yeah, definitely go check those out. You'll get a good laugh because it's not exactly the sound I'm doing today. It's kind of evolved over the last 15, 20 years, but it should still be entertaining. So let's see here. Have you fooled around with the Archer's rig yet? I have not. I haven't gotten it yet. It's still being shipped. The Archer's rig is a new module from Shakmat, the ones that made the battering ram, which I'm totally in love with. And they are sending me their new unit, which I think it's actually released tomorrow. I think tomorrow's the day that it comes out. I was hoping to have it beforehand so I could do some kind of first day video, but I haven't gotten it yet. It's being shipped from Belgium. And it is their new hi-hat module, which is really cool. I got to play around with it a little at Superbooth and really enjoyed it. Has the same kind of flexibility of controls that the battering ram has, but in a hi-hat module. And it has the ability to save presets because it's a digital analog combo. So there are some presets that you can save in it. And it has some preset banks that are kind of 909 style hats, 808 style hats, 606, 707. I think those are all in there. And then there's other banks that you can save of your own. So you can kind of come up with your own presets and save them, plus a lot of flexibility. So I'm really excited to start messing with that. I should get that later this coming week, which will be, I think, a ton of fun. So I'll have to find a space for that in my case coming up. So we'll see where that ends up. I've been on Modular Grid a lot lately, kind of moving things around, figuring out where it can fit. I haven't decided if the ZR is going to come out of this case and the Oxy is going to move up here and the Archer's rig will come down here, or if I take out the Oxy and put in the Archer's rig, and I don't know. I haven't decided yet. So if you want to go on my Modular Grid, you can see my brainstorming for how I might want to put these modules together. But tons of fun. Any more questions? See if anybody else has anything to ask or chat about. One more shameless plug for the course. If you're interested in doing that, space is limited to each cohort. The next cohort is going to be starting August 8th. Is it the 8th or the 9th? August 8th. And the pre-sale's open for that now on my website. So you can go to circlelive.com/courses, or there's a link in the description of this video that will take you right there. If you get signed up for the course, it's 52 videos, I think, more than 50 videos. That are broken out into 8 sections, and each of those 8 sections has a group live Q&A that we do, 2 per week for a month, going over each section. So like today was about kick and bass, and we were talking about that. Those are Sundays and Wednesdays, and we got everybody together. Everybody's helping each other, asking me lots of questions. I'm going through demonstrations like what I was doing here, showing how to do different things online. Then they can send me, everybody in the course can send me each week up to a 10-minute video recording of them performing live, and I'll give them feedback on their performances. You know, the performance part, the sound design, the mixing, the transitions, and all of that kind of stuff, and kind of give them feedback as an impartial viewer to help them improve. And they do that each week. So over the course of the 4 weeks, they can see some improvement in their live performance. There's also a one-on-one coaching session for an hour that we do via Zoom. So everybody can schedule their one-on-one whenever they want during the month. And we can chat about whatever you want. Kind of, if you have a specific module you want to work with, or you want to talk, about something in your setup, or you want us to listen to your tracks and kind of go through different things, we can do whatever you want in those. And then the final thing is that there's an online community of everybody who's done the course, and that the video course and the online community you have access to after the month. So the month limit is just the twice weekly group calls and the one-on-one and the feedback each week. But after the month, you still have unlimited access to the course. So you can go back and watch whatever sections you want as many times as you want. And you have access ongoing to the group community that's online. So everybody's kind of in there asking questions, posting mixes, asking questions about gear or how different people are doing different things, and kind of helping each other along and supporting each other in their learning through this whole process of learning how to perform live. And everything is really geared towards live performance and more specifically improvised live performance. Although we talk about everything, I think a lot of people are doing this because they want to do more improvised, and it's how to incorporate more improvisation into your live sets. And it's for pretty much any level. I mean, if you're just getting into this, you're gonna get a lot out of it, and you can go back and watch the videos as much as you want. And if you've been doing this for a long time, you'll probably also get a lot out of it, because you'll get just a different perspective, different ways of looking at things from my experience that may be different from your experience. And it's, it'll give you some, hopefully some inspiration to improve your improvisation, if that makes sense. To kind of inspire everybody to have the amount of fun that I have doing this. And there's people in the course, for example, that they want to perform live in front of a crowd. So we're working on that. But there's also people that just want to be able to just jam and play themselves and have a good time playing live at home, and they don't have any aspirations to even play in front of people. And this helps with that as well. So it's really just to get you more comfortable and confident playing this kind of composite instrument that you build on a table in front of you using hardware gear and or modular. If you're into modular, there's sections on that. If you're not into modular, that's fine too. Everything relates to both. So you can get something out of it no matter what you're doing. So if you want to do that, click the link in the description below or go to my website, circlelive.com/courses, and get signed up for the next cohort that begins in a couple weeks. And again, space is limited, so if you want to do it, jump right in. There's a payment thing, so you don't have to pay all at once. You can do this thing called Afterpay and pay for it in payments, which is cool too. So whatever you want, whichever's easiest for you. Let's see here. Any chance of a course in the winter? Yes, there's a chance, but I don't know at all. I'm trying to schedule the courses whenever I can, but I have to schedule them around my day job because they do take a lot of time to do the calls each week and the feedback and the one-on-ones and all of that stuff. So it all kind of depends on how busy I get with my day job. It may go away for a while. I may do one each month. I just don't know. It all kind of depends on the time that I have available. So if you want to do it, jump on it now so you can guarantee you get one. I would love to have you and love to see you there. 100% recommend. Thanks, Jason. Glad you're enjoying it. Art says, hi, do you think the Syntact or Digitone is a better match with the Digitac 2? It depends on what you want to use them for. So I used to have a Digitone. As soon as I got the Syntact, I sold it. And it wasn't because one necessarily replaced the other on a one-to-one basis. I was using it in my live setup as a way to have multiple voices for melodic stuff in one box, but still have a synth workflow that wasn't a sample workflow. And with the Digitone, I could have 4 voices in one box, which was great. Then the Syntact came out and all of a sudden I could have 12 voices in the exact same size box. So the Digitone went away really fast and the Syntact became my replacement in my live set at that point. So it all depends. The Digitone is a really specific sound. It is an FM synth. It is a very specific FM sound. And if you like that sound, there's not really anything else other than the model cycles, which sounds quite like it. And so it's a really good one for that, if that's what you're looking for. It has some polyphony. It has the ability to MIDI sequence as well, but it is only 4 tracks of audio and 4 tracks of MIDI. So it gives you a bit of a limited number of tracks. But if you've got the Digitac 2, you've already got 16, so you may not need those. Digitac 2 can do stereo samples, but not polyphonic. So the Digitone is polyphonic. So if that's important to you, great. I don't use polyphony in my setup, so it wasn't important to me at all. So I was using it as 4 mono voices. And so I just swapped it out for the Syntact so I could use 12 mono voices. I also have a preference personally for more analog sound than FM sound. So being able to have analog synth engines in the Syntact, I really enjoyed. And then the digital engines in the Syntact are also really, really good. So it gave me a lot of opportunity to have the sounds I was looking for, where the Digitone was an FM sound that I wasn't super in love with. So I guess it comes back to, if you love the FM sound and polyphony is important to you, then the Digitone would be a better one to pair with the Digitac 2. If you are looking for more diversity of sound and polyphony is not important to you, but having multiple voices is important, then I would say the Syntact is probably a better choice. So, but again, preference. I still have the Syntact. I don't have the Digitone anymore. So that is, I guess that can answer the question by itself. Let's see, do you use Q mixing on the mixer? You can. I don't, but you can. I mean, this mixer setup, so like if you were to Q everything, so like let's say I wanted to mix these 2 tracks, I can Q those. I have a Q that can go from mix to Q, so you can kind of decide what's going out the headphone output, and then you've got a separate headphone volume. So it's exactly like a DJ mixer. So you can set this up just like a DJ mixer and have Q outs and Q mix in your headphones if you chose to. If that's what you want to do. So yes, it does do it. I don't do it personally, but yeah, it absolutely can do it. Let's see here. Do you think that the Octatrack is the ideal mixer with the Digitac 2 and Syntac? So the Octatrack, the thing with the Octatrack is it can be so many different things that it is great as a mixer. If you just want to have those inputs going in, maybe use the performance template that EasyBot made and have some performance effects and all that stuff, it's great for that. But there are other mixers that are specific mixers. So I know people that use the Octatrack as a mixer the way I did for a long time. I know people that use DJ mixers when they perform, and they'll put each piece of gear into a separate channel. So that way they've got the DJ mixer with an EQ per track, and they've got performance effects inside there for depending on what kind of mixer they're using, which is great. I know other people who use more of a desk mixer, like you would have in a studio, but a smaller version of that, so that they also have EQ per track, and they can put things into mix buses, and they can have auxiliary sends and things like that. So it really depends on your use. If what you need is something to sum the sounds together of a few different instruments and then use performance effects or looping or things like that, yeah, the Octatrack's awesome for that. And if you already have an Octatrack, then yeah, don't spend any money on another mixer just to do exactly what the Octatrack can already do. I wouldn't say to go out and spend, $1,200, $1,500, $1,800, depending on how you buy it, dollars on an Octatrack just to use it as a mixer if you don't already have it. You may already have another mixer for, a studio mixer desktop or a DJ style mixer or whatever. So I would say use whatever you have from a mixer standpoint. I wouldn't say that there's any one that's going to be greater than any other that would warrant you going out and spending a bunch of money on it. Unless you get into the really high end of stuff, then there's some real differences. I mean, there's a reason why you see a lot of live performers that are using, the Allen and Heath zone mixers or the Play Differently, or which is also an Allen and Heath, same thing. Or like the Pioneer V10 is another mixer that has a ton of inputs. It has a compressor per channel. It has a 4-band EQ. It has sends and returns to use outboard effects. It has internal effects. It has bus effects. It has the ability to send, to route internal effects as if they were sends. So there's all kinds of different things you could do with something like a V10, but it's like $3,500 and it's as big as this whole setup and weighs like 40 pounds. So I would say unless you're traveling the world in a way where you can have a rider where you can tell them to have one of those for you waiting so you don't have to haul it around, I wouldn't waste any time on going that route. So I would say just use whatever you have first and foremost, and then if you're going to buy one, look at something that does exactly what you need it to do, and you don't necessarily need more. So that's why I have everything using just this mixer in my case, because I don't need it to do any more than what this mixer already does. I don't need to spend the money or the hassle of having another big piece of outboard gear that I have to spend extra money on and haul around and stuff like that. So let's see here. The Q can also be used as another send. Yes, it can. Hi. See, the quadrant swarm is out. Yeah, it's been out for a little bit now. Why it left? It left for space. I mean, like the simple answer is to have it as one voice that was basically taking up half of this row of my case just for one voice one mono synth was I couldn't justify, yes, it's cool and it sounds good and I love the sound of it and I love using it. I still use it. I still have it. It's right over there. But it was too much space in here. And so I took it out of here. I put it back into its case, the box that it comes in, so that it can be a separate hardware synth if I decide I want to use it again in my live setup. But otherwise, I'll just keep it in the studio for production, because it sounds great, but it's just not worth the space that it takes up for me. Let's see. I was thinking about Allen and Heath PX5 as a mixer. Yeah, it's a cool mixer. If you prefer a DJ style mixer, that's great. Go down that road. And if you prefer that particular one, that's great too. It's whatever you're comfortable with and whatever you prefer to use. I would keep it that way. For me, the mixer is much more of kind of a utility item and less of a performance item. There are a lot of artists, like if you ever watch Ura's channel, he talks a lot about how for him, his mixer, he uses it as a performance tool, whereas I use the mixer more as a utility, as a way to fade things in and out or send to other stuff. And most of what I'm doing in my live performance is not happening on the mixer. It's happening in the modules. And if I had something like a DJ style mixer, I would be spending so much time using that and using those things that I wouldn't be, doing sound design and changing up sequences and things like that. So as I mentioned before, it's all kind of, it comes down to playing to your strengths. And I prefer to spend my time in live performance playing the sequencer and playing the voices, doing the sound design part and sequencing the patterns. And I would rather spend my time on that than tweaking an EQ on a mixer. I can do enough with my sound design that I don't need to mess with the EQ too much. I can do it kind of in big chunks. And so having that would be less useful for me. So that's why I only have this, and I don't use the EQ, and I don't have an EQ per channel and don't even use that stuff. But if your preference is, particularly if you're going to be doing stuff that's more pre-prepared, you won't need to spend the time doing the things with the instruments. So you can then spend the time, EQing sounds and getting things dialed in and using send effects on the mixer and all of that stuff. So again, it comes down to you playing to your own strengths and whatever those are, that are probably different from mine. Everybody has different strengths. I guarantee everybody on here is far better than me at something else. So let's see, what was it? My channel's bomb, thanks. I appreciate that. I'm super excited too. Actually, let me check this really quick online, just so you can share in the excitement. I don't know if you can see this on my phone, but I am at 9,984 subscribers on my channel. So I am 16 away from 10,000, which I think is pretty cool. Couldn't believe it that it would ever get to that point. I started this channel, I don't know if I started during COVID or right at the, like as things were opening back up again, but it was really because I was really getting into the hardware live performance thing. And there was a lot of information out there that I wasn't finding on YouTube. And so I was having to learn stuff on my own. So I was saying, you know what, I want to learn this stuff and I want to teach it to other people and be the stuff that I wasn't able to find, so I can help other people so they don't have to suffer through the trial and error of it all like I did. And so that's kind of where this started. So the fact that now there's 10,000 people that want to subscribe to this and watch these videos, and particularly the live streams and stuff, it blows me away. So I really appreciate all of you for being on the streams and for watching the videos and all of that stuff. So yeah, it's mind-blowing that I'm about to go past 10,000 subscribers with this channel. And I've been able to do it without having to, do commercials for gear or do reviews of, I don't know, toys that I don't like or whatever. Like everything that you'll see a review for on here or information about is all something that I use personally. And so like if I want to do a review on something, I'll reach out to a company and say, hey, will you loan me that or send it to me for free or whatever? And I'll review it. Sometimes they do, sometimes they don't. And if they don't, a lot of times I just end up buying it. And like 90% of what you see here, I bought with my own money because it's stuff that I want. And every once in a while, somebody will give me something like the Oxy Coral. Oxy sent that to me, and the battering ram as well, and the analog heat plus effects. But everything, and the Meta, everything else that you see here is all something that I bought myself because it was worth it enough for me. And the other ones, had they not sent them, I would have bought them anyway. So it was just nice that they did, but it's not because they sent me something that I'm going to tell you it's awesome and you should buy it and whatever. So anyway, thank you. I appreciate all of you. Hey Art, thanks for the tip. I didn't even realize that was a thing until a couple streams ago when somebody did that. I was like, anyway, thank you very much. I appreciate it. It helps me not have to stress so much about money from the day job and lets me keep focusing on music. Let's see. Synchrotron, the drone maestro. Nice. I'm sure you're going to keep growing here on YouTube. Really appreciate everything you do. That's helped me a lot on this journey with the gear. Well, thanks, Jason. I appreciate that. I hope it keeps growing too. It's been a slow, steady growth, which I love. I love the fact that it's just been kind of organically growing and I don't have to do a bunch of stupid videos to try and get clicks and attract new people and strategize about what's the audience that prefers whatever. I can just say, look, this is what I do. And if you like it, this is the place for you. And if you don't like it, and if you're looking for, if you want a video manual on how every piece of gear works, I watch Loop Hop for that stuff. So if that's what you want, you should definitely watch Loop Hop. And the same thing, like there's a lot of other content creators on YouTube that I love and that I watch to learn stuff. And I'm sure we all watch kind of the same ones, but watching a wide variety of people who are making different types of music using this same kind of gear will just inspire you to do other cool things yourself with your gear. And, so like, for example, Ura and I have gotten to be really good friends over the last couple of years. And I love his channel, and his music and my music couldn't be any more different, but we use really similar gear. And every single time I watch one of his videos, I learn something, and I learn something that I'll use in my performances and my productions, because I think it's great. I listen to Ricky Tinez a ton. I love house music, so obviously I love what he does as well, but it's also not the same stuff that I do, but I learn something every time I watch one of his videos. And even though they're like really short and kind of to the point, I watched his video yesterday about building a track from a sample, and I learned something that I didn't know about sampling in the D Attack 2. And I was like, oh, cool. And I just went right into it and started using it for my own production or my own performance, but because I learned something from somebody else. So yeah, I appreciate that you guys like it here and that you're enjoying this channel, and appreciate that you guys are all here. Let's see, who are some artists inspiring me these days? Who am I into? So we just talked about some like content creators that I like to watch online and stuff that they do. But as far as actual like performing, whether they're live artists or producers, I'm a huge fan of Rodhad. If you have listened to his stuff, he's amazing. He's an amazing producer. He owns a couple different record labels. He's a DJ, and he's also a live performer. He's played live with a couple of the different store events. And I love his music. I love watching his DJ sets. I mean, his song selection is amazing, and I love what he plays and I love what he produces. In my car all the time on Spotify, I constantly have the Rodhad radio in my car a lot. I also like Dasha Rush. I think she's pretty amazing. Love Colin Benders as far as the improvised techno modular side of things. Let's see, who else do I love? Renee Wise is another artist that I've really been into lately. I love Surgeon, Lady Starlight, Maidon. Who else? Yeah, there's a bunch. I mean, it's funny because there's some people that I watch because I like their live performance stuff. And then there's other people that I love their production and I kind of listen to their channels on Spotify and whatever else. So there's a guy who is just kind of up and coming now called Quelza. He's a resident at Berghain in Berlin. His productions are really cool as well. He just came to the US just recently. I got to hear him at Berghain when I was in Berlin the last time. Really amazing. Really digging his stuff. Let's see. Yeah, a lot of those people. So yeah, check them out. Plus a bunch of my friends are super talented and amazing live performers. Travarsi, Alex 106, David Castellani. Yeah, like there's a ton of people out there that are just really, really good at what they do. So yeah, check it all out. All right, what is next? Explanation and demonstration of Sen's return was worth a sub. Awesome, thank you. I'll take this. I'll take the sub because I'm closing in. Let's see. 99.85. I'm 15 away from 10,000. So if you guys all subscribed, if you're not, we can hit 10,000 during the stream. That'd be pretty cool. Let's see here. Do you think analog heat plus effects will replace the Big Sky? No. Simple answer. No. The reverb is good on it, but I still prefer the reverb on the Big Sky. So if I was just going to do just a reverb, I would do that. The reason there's a couple reasons why I really like the Heat Plus effects. One is as an end of chain, because of the bass mono more than anything else. Being able to mono everything below 200 hertz is really important when you're playing live on a big system. And so the ability to do that on the master out, I think is great. I love being able to add light saturation so that I can kind of fill out the frequency spectrum so it sounds more like a mastered track when it goes out. And same goes for drive. And then being able to use the high pass filter so that I can boost my low end is something else that's really important. But basically I just have a preset that I made for that and I put it on that and don't ever touch it. I just kind of leave it exactly where it is. So yeah, I think it's great for that. I don't really use the effects in it hardly at all. I have a little bit. I did a video about this a while ago. I feel like it should have been two separate machines. I think it should have been an Analog Heat Mark III that had everything the Mark II did, plus added the bass mono. That would have been amazing. And then you have a second unit, which is all of the effects, because then you could put those anywhere in your chain. But right now, it's designed, or I shouldn't say it's designed. It works really well as an end of chain device because of the bass mono and some other things. But the effects that are in it are more sound design, sound shaping effects, and not performance effects. So you have to kind of use it as one or the other. And so I use it as an end of chain. And because of that, I don't use those effects at all. I just use the things that help with my, kind of end of chain signal processing. So I'm in the box, Ableton Live, but I learn a lot about sound design from you and the modular guys. Cool. I'm in the box and out of the box. Actually, you can see here, I was right before this stream. I was in the box. You can see on the computer that I have Ableton right back there. So yeah, I'm not this kind of like, oh, it has to be DAWless if you're whatever. I don't care. Like, use a computer, don't use a computer, use whatever's good for you, whatever you enjoy, whatever sounds good, whatever is fun. This is supposed to be fun, so use whatever is fun. For me, it's fun to do some things in the box and some things hardware. I prefer sequencing and sound design in hardware boxes because I like the immediacy and the hands-on and all that stuff. And then I prefer arrangement and mastering and kind of all of that stuff in the box because it's just easier to be able to just lay everything out and move things around and it's great. So I actually record almost all of the stuff that I use in production is recorded from my hardware that's here in the studio, and then I'll record that into Ableton, and then I'll make adjustments in there to kind of build out a whole track. So yeah, I'm right there with you in the box. But I'm glad that you're learning stuff from this because it's all the same. I mean, it's really funny because people they get so like tribal about, oh, this synth is better than this synth is better than this synth. And it's like, you know what? They're all just synths and they're all the same. Like they all have an oscillator and a filter and an envelope and whatever. They all have those same things. And if you know how to use one for one thing, you can use it somewhere else. So if you are in the box using a soft synth and you're adjusting the parameters to make a sound, those parameters are going to be basically the same if you're using a hardware synth. So learn that, then use hardware synths, learn hardware synths, then take it in the box, whichever you prefer. It's all easier. I just prefer the inspiration for me that comes from the tactile side, to be able to like grab a knob and turn it and hear the sound change. I like that much more than taking the mouse and clicking on the knob and dragging it to make the sound change. For me, that's less inspiring. And so that's why I have all the hardware and why I play around with it so much, is because I get inspired by that gear. But you know, the tools are way better in the box. They're just less inspiring for me. So but it's up to everybody else. Let's see here. Quill's cinematic techno production is so good. Yeah, he's really great. His stuff is amazing. And he's a great DJ as well. I heard when I went to the event at Berghain, when I was in Berlin for Super Booth, it was the event that Dasha Rush put on with Colin Benders and I can't remember who else there was, but it was a live hardware event. But Quilza, being one of the resident DJs from there, he played an opening DJ set and a closing DJ set after all the hardware guys played. So I got to hear him play twice in a night at different times of the night, and both sets were outstanding. And he's really, really good. Like his the flow of what he was doing and kind of the storytelling of his DJing was really good. So yeah, and he's very much the same in his production too. It's very rich from a sound design standpoint. So yeah, I love his stuff. Let's see, very insightful on the heat plus effects. Yeah, no problem. I definitely feel that with that machine. It's really great, but I think my video, I can't remember, I called it something like, you know, did Electron make a mistake or something? Because for me, I feel like they made a business mistake. They took a whatever, like $700 analog heat, added all these effects and new features and sold it for $700. They sold it basically for the same price. What I think they should have done is made an analog heat Mark III, which was the exact same as the heat, but had the bass mono. And then they made a separate unit that was the effects unit that you could use for everything. And they could have sold them both for probably $700 each. I mean, like that's how much a good, you know, Eric synth pedal or Strymon or something, they're going to cost a lot of money, or what do you call it? Eventide, like their multi effects units are expensive like that too. So they could have made the money off of it. And I think that was their mistake. Like they missed out on selling me 2 boxes. Instead, they sold me both of them in one, but in a format where I could only use one or the other at a time. And so I was like, just break it up and charge me twice as much money. And most of us, you know, fools for their gear would have probably bought both of them. So anyway, could have made a lot more money. How do you like the Chaos Zadar? I love it. It's really cool. I actually, it's not even patched into anything right now because I just recently added it into my case. But as envelopes and LFOs go, it's cool because I love the screen and the graphics where you can actually see what the shape is of whatever wave you're using. Even though it's a tiny little screen, it gives you a really good feel for what the shape of that is. So it's, I love it because again, when you talk about like, if I was going to add modulation to something, that's why I have it here. So if I'm playing and I want something to modulate that I didn't patch, I always have patch cables with me when I'm playing live, and I can just patch something on the fly. And with the Zadar, I can see what the waveform looks like in the window before I patch it. So that way I know more or less what that LFO is going to sound like, or that envelope is going to sound like, what the movement's going to be by being able to look at it. So I think it's really cool. The PAMS does a lot of similar stuff, but you can't really see, it doesn't have as complex of waveforms. They're the very simple, very basic ones. And you can't see what they look like before here, other than like, there's a sine wave kind of graphic, but it's just an example of a sine wave. This one you can see the actual kind of complexities of a complex envelope or a complex LFO. So it's very cool. I do like it. I think it's very cool. And you can say presets on it too. Let's see here. Did they make a big mistake? Yeah, that's what it was. That's as close as you'll ever see me to get to a clickbait thumbnail title, because it was like I really felt like it was a mistake, but everybody was like, "Oh, what do you think about it? What do you think about it?" And I was like, "Well, I think it's great. I think it's amazing, and I think they could have charged me twice as much by splitting it into 2 different boxes." Was kind of for me the mistake that they made. So I'm still using it, but I'm not using, so like the bit reduction, the chorus, the delay, and the reverb, and the warble, like the tape delay one, those are all inactive. And I'm using very light compressor, the saturation from the heat, and the bass mono, and then the filter and the drive that are on the front face. And that's it. So I'm only using kind of half of what it does, but it's still pretty cool. Well, cool. I think we're going to call it a day. Thank you guys all for tuning in. I really appreciate it. I appreciate all the support from everybody. If you want to do the course, just click that link below. Or if you have any questions about it, just hit me up on Instagram. I'm happy to answer any questions that you have about the course. I want to try to get that filled up pretty soon here. It's going to be starting in a couple weeks. So there's only a limited number of spaces available. So definitely sign up for that if you're interested in it, because the spaces will go. And if you have any questions about if people are enjoying it, just ask the people that you've got here on the chat. You know, I know Wabbit's there, Jason, a few of the others are in that. So yeah, definitely hit them up and ask them what they think about it, if they like it. And hopefully I can get you guys to sign up to that. And I would love to see you in there so we can chat more about this kind of in a one-on-one setting or in a group setting. So I appreciate it. Thank you guys very much for tuning in. Thanks for all the support of the channel, and look forward to seeing you in the